interesting author. Arun is a multifaceted personality. He is conversant in several languages, including Japanese. He is an expert in the IT sector, highly qualified and lived around the world. And it makes it all the more interesting for people like us to read a story written by such a person. First, let me tell you, dear readers, let us welcome Arun Krishnan. And on behalf of the organizers, I apologize for the delay due to some technical hitches. But the book is worth it. It is a book which has come out after perhaps years of waiting and in penance. I remember reading the book Sivakami in Sabadam by Kalki, The Promise of Sivakami or The Oath of Sivakami. During my childhood, I suppose Arun and myself are around the same age. This deals with and by the Battle of Vathapi, Nandi's Charge. It's a trilogy, and this is the first book. There are a lot of suspenses and nail-biting parts in this book, and full credit goes to Arun, and whoever's designed the wrapper has done a very good job. You have the two flags, the boar flag or the Varaha flag of the Chalukyas on Vathapi, and about 700 kilometers away in Kanchipuram you have the bull flag. As we are all aware, the Pallava kingdom was known for being highly civilized, very scholarly, craft, etc. And also revenge of Narasimhavarma Pallava, the famous Chalukya emperor, had invaded Kanchipuram and sort of neutralized Mahendravarma Pallava, the father of Narasimhavarma Pallava, at Pullalur, in the Battle of Pullalur, after which the senior Pallava monarch passed away. He had handed over his charge to his son Narasimha, and Narasimha takes a good dozen years to create a very strong army, an impressive spy network, to go back and defeat Pulikesin II in his capital Vathapi. Thereby he earned the famous title or the epithet Vathapi Konda Narasimhan. So Arun Krishnan is here to tell us how Narasimhavarma Pallava became Vathapi Konda Narasimhan. The story is very beautiful and very interesting. He has introduced a host of characters, and each of these characters have their own unique traits. A fully vegetarian soldier, and people want to know how this gentleman is so strong in spite of being vegetarian. But yes, he is. You should read to find out who it is now. I'm not going to give his name, though I may give out few names here and there, but still this name will not be given. And then Arun takes us into Sri Lanka from Kodikkarai. You enter Sri Lanka, you go through the forest, you meet a few interesting people, a couple of challenges, and that's very nice. This is something which is not found in Kalki Sivakami in Sabadam though. This kind of an approach. It's very nice and refreshing. And the dense forests of Sri Lanka are, I'm sure if somebody could make a movie with the aid of this book, it will be wonderful. Through Netflix or, Amazon Prime, a serial or a movie could be made. We get to know about Manavamma, and then he takes us to the Pandyan capital. We get to meet the Pandyan monarch, Jayantavarma Pandyan. Then we get to meet his brother Nedumaran and the ruler of Korkai, who is the father-in-law of Nedumaran. So, and we also are taken to the Bannari temple. I've been to Bannari so many times, and Arun told me that he's been there many times too. Even now it is in a dense jungle. Imagine how it would have been 1300 years ago. And then the Dimbam Ghats, Asanur, and the forests. Very interesting. And the fortress at Asanur, the Gangas of Talakad. And he talks about the crown prince of the Gangas, the so-called crown prince of the Gangas, and the preferred choice of the Ganga ruler too. Well, Arun has taken the liberty of bringing in Mr. Naganandi once again, the Buddhist monk. He reappears in this book at the head of the spy network in Vathapi. Can we ever forget Naganandi? We can even forget Pulikesin, but we cannot forget Naganandi. And if it was possible to have illustrations in a book of this kind, it would have been even more fabulous. Kalki's work had, especially the serialized one, the bound volumes had a number of illustrations, but of course, the books sold in the shops do not have illustrations. Perhaps the cost of printing is a great deterrent. Then, of course, we get to meet the famous Chinese traveler Hyun Sang in the story, and the movement of some of the spies from Kanchipuram to Vathapi to Dandakaranya to go and meet Emperor Harsha. Wow, it's so beautiful to get to have a sight of the Narmada and the bridge which takes a person across. And of course, what are these stories if there are no interesting escapades and companions? We have the very pretty Indumati and the pretty and smart and heroic Sangamitra. We get to know a little bit about the scholars at the Nalanda University, and we get to understand the closeness that some of the scholars and international visitors enjoyed with some of the domestic rulers. It is simply beautiful. The escapade or the journey through Dandakaranya is made even more interesting with the forest dwellers and their lives. Revenge is also part of the story, very much inside. And what can running behind lust do for a person is also very well brought out and captured. But man has never learnt a lesson. Then, of course, we get to meet the famous Paranjoti, the commander-in-chief of the Pallava armies, the CNC. He happens to be one of the 63 Nayanmars. And he was the one who brought the statue of Vathapi Ganapati and placed it in his native village, Tiruchengattangudi. And that Ganesha is still in Tiruchengattangudi. And I suppose Muthuswami Dikshitar's Kriti, Vathapi Ganapati, perhaps could be related to that. It needs to be verified. I'm just shooting off. We get to see probably, if it is, if I'm right, the end of the Vilayadal Puranam and a part of the Periya Puranam coinciding in this story along with history, and both the Puranams are real too. They explain as to how people stay in a towl tree or a traveler's bungalow kind of a thing on the way, and how people get inebriated, and how some vegetarian or non-vegetarian food is offered, how they rest with tents. All this is made very interesting. And fortunately, the author has converted all the yojanas into kilometers. He has done it properly, and it makes it easy for us to read and understand. Otherwise, you'll have to have a footnote where it would say 1 yojana is equal to dash 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 kilometers or miles. And the thought of each character or the thinking process of each character has been brought out really well. There is some sort of a retrospection or a thinking process or foresight or agony or worry in the minds of some of the characters in this book. And that has been explicitly and implicitly brought out by the author. Kudos to him. Sometimes lots of authors try to do this, but it crashes halfway through. When you start making your characters think in the book, and that thinking, if it is not transferred to the reader properly, the reader loses interest. Here the author has succeeded with aplomb. The thought process of the characters are brought out in a very vivid and interesting manner, and it captures the imagination of the reader. Therefore, the book is unputdownable. There are several people who have already given their testimony for this book. I am perhaps the nth person. Anand Ranganathan, Ashwin Sangi, Sai Swarupa Iyer, Abhinav Agarwal, Sunanda Vasisht, Harini Kalamur, and Francois Gauthier and Abhinav Agarwal. Many of these people I personally know and have interacted with. The people of letters and great merit. If they have something good to talk about this, I'm really indeed happy. And I think I'm only fortunate to give this recommendation once again. The book is big, close to 500 pages. The author has spared no effort in making sure that the narration is brought out properly. It's interesting and unputdownable. The puja in the temple at Bannari, the functioning of spies, and how it is spy versus spy, and how each person guesses, the guess estimate or the guesstimate of the spy network leaders are brought out in a very, very interesting manner by Arun. Like, say, for example, I would think of what my opponent might think and perhaps try to evolve a strategy. And the opponent tries to double cross me in his mind, and both of us meet in a particular place. So these are things which Arun has brought out well, especially in the place where the spies and the people of the Chalukyas, both of them try to meet each other. They were not supposed to meet each other. One wants to meet the other, but one wants to avoid. And yet they crisscross each other's paths. And that's very interesting. And the story of Krishnappa, the head of one of the forts, is brought out in a very nice manner. He is put inside jail by his prince, and yet he wants to defend his fort. The sense of duty in a person who suffers, or rather made to suffer, is brought out in an appropriate manner. And similarly, Durai Singham, one of the small, tiny rulers who goes along with an army. Initially, we tried to, even a reader could underestimate Durai Singham, but he does his job well. It looks as though he is dilly-dallying, flip-flopping, and hesitating, vacillating, but yet gets his job done. And this is the condition of India. When we read Parthiban Kanavu by Kalki has brought out the story of Narasimhavarma Pallava in that as a character beautifully. I remember the Tamil movie adaptation with S.V. Rangarao stating that, look at North India. The empire is so large, the empire of Harsha. Even Nuru Kada Duram, or that long 100, yojana distance, there is only one kingdom. But inside Tamil Nadu, every 10 kada duram or every 10 kada distances or 10 yojanas, there is a kingdom. And how will you be strong? How will you be resilient if you have such small kingdoms? And therefore, the Pallava emperor tries to consolidate in order to keep his kingdom strong and healthy. I suppose we'll be getting to see more of Narasimha. Here, Narasimha is like, coming fleetingly, and we don't get to see much of him. And for many of us, he is a very big hero. He's shown as a knight in shining armor, and full of energy and speed in Kalki Sivakami in Sabadam. And finally, his father tells him that, you look here, my dear boy, this war came up because of me, and let me find my own way to sort it out. And if it doesn't, you will find your own way after enough experience. And that's exactly what happens. And the advice and through Arun Krishnan's book, we get to see Narasimha adhering to his father's advice, wherein he tries to, create a web of enemies around his enemy. Otherwise, in the times of Mahendra Varma, the Pandya was his enemy, the Chalukya was his enemy. Everybody was surrounding the Pallava kingdom due to carelessness. And in this case, Narasimha is reversing it by trying to knit alliances. Now, my question is, the easier path for Arun would have been to simply translate the Sivakami in Sabadam, or to do an adaptation of that story itself, because can we ever forget that Sivakami or the Pulikesi or the Kannapiran or the Gundodharan or Neelakesi in the story, or Ranjini, and the Pavalamalli and the Uranga Iravu, wherein we get to enter, so decently Kalki says in one of the chapters, Uranga Iravu, wherein, due to the circumstances, we are entering into the bedroom of the Pallava emperor. Otherwise, we would not have got inside that place. So, it would have been, for the skill of Arun, he would have probably brought it out really well. But then, I want to know why he did this. And he has done it very well. So that shows that here is an author who has enough confidence and who's sure of what he's doing. And plus, the research is sound, because the description of the regions really match so much which can be seen or heard. See, history is a continuous process. In fact, you have the works of so many people. Now more and more information is coming out. So it must have been quite challenging for Arun to begin with Kalki, to begin with people like Neelakanta Shastri, then come to the latest epigraphists and historians who've done work till 2000, 2005, 2010, 2015, put them all together and bring this book out. So it would be like one would have to drink a mug of magic potion to do a book like this. Because whatever you do, somebody will come and say, hey, you could have done it like this, you could have done it like that. Because they'll always try to connect it with the work of Kalki. But let us remember that these are all adaptations based on history and not exactly 100% history. To be very honest, many of our historians who claim to be great scholars and historians have done great disservice by giving wrong facts or giving their own interpretations. On that front, we must be happy that we have authors like Arun Krishnan, Venkatesh Rangan, Sai Swarupa, Vivek Debroy, who are helping us to look at it in an appropriate and proper perspective. We are never made to feel guilty. We are never made to look as though we've spoiled something. Very beautiful, very nicely written. So I'm here to, look at how he, ask Arun how he got into the descriptions. Like there's a big looking guy, there's a thin looking guy, and how, somebody, a ruler with a bloated face, a pudgy nose. Normally, when we look at the rulers, it's very cliched or typical. A sharp nose, sharp teeth, or bald or long hair, or eagle-like eyes or a vulture look. All those things are very highly cliche. But here, when we look at the description of the rulers, the description of the people, he talks about the well-muzzled, well-built spies, but they wish to act and also act as ordinary people, and how they interact with the local society and how they go about all their course. The book is full of spies. The first volume of this book is completely, I think, with due credit, you know, uh, full of the espionage network of the Pallavas, the espionage network of the Pandyas, the Sri Lankan rulers, and the espionage network of the Chalukyas. And Arun has juggled them very well, and all of them, nothing is falling down. It is getting juggled and going around with him, and the reader can get along very well. It's not difficult to follow also. Hats off and congratulations, Arun. Now over to you. What made you think of this?
Think of this as a story, you mean?
Yes. Why did you take this up? As a
okay.
First, motivated you rather. That would be better.
Well, first of all, Rajesh, thank you so much for having me on your show, and for all the kind words that you have spoken about the book. I was actually happy because certain things, for example, when you mentioned Krishnappa and his dilemma in terms of going with his dharma or his duty rather than letting what happened to him affect it. Those are things I wrote with a lot of consciously written, and I was so glad to hear that struck a chord with you as well. But thank you so much for the kind words. Okay, so why did I go with this? I was always a fan of history, especially after school. Obviously, during school days, none of us is a fan of history because of the way it is taught to us. After that, I used to read a lot of historical fiction. So Victor Hugo, Alexander Dumas, the whole Hunchback of Notre Dame and Count of Monte Cristo and Man with Iron Mask and stuff like that. I used to really like that. One little clarification I want to give you. I wouldn't have read Shivagami and Savadam the same age as you, not because we are different in age. It's because I grew up outside Tamil Nadu. So I never learned Tamil in school. My mom had taught me the letters. I wanted to read Kalki in the original. So in order to do that, I just picked up Ponniyin Selvan Volume 1 and started reading. And it took me 1 year to finish the first volume because, I'd never read Tamil, right? So for every sentence, I would have a dictionary with me. I would be going into it. So the first book took me 1 year. The other 4 volumes took me the next few months. And by then my reading speed had increased at the end of 1 year. So that's how then after that, I read Shivagami and Savadam and Parthivan Kanavu and all of that. Went on to Bharatiyar. So my Tamil is all self-taught. I've never been taught Tamil in school. I grew up in the north and east. So Hindi is more of something that I learned at school. So what I'm saying is you must have read Shivagami and Savadam when you're much younger than I was. And I
was perhaps maybe 15 years old.
No, I was probably around 30 when I read it. So I came to it very late. But anyway, Kalki to me, when I read that, I was stunned, right? I was stunned and to think, and now when I have written my own book, what I'm even more stunned by is the fact that Kalki wrote it as a series, right? In the magazine. I could go back when I was doing this, I could, go back, edit things that happened in the past or mix chapters around if they didn't fit in the right sequence. Kalki had no way of doing that. Once he wrote it and once it appeared in print, everything after that had to be in consonance with that. So to me, that requires a remarkable genius. I don't think ordinary mere mortals can do that. I think Kalki being Kalki could manage it. So to me, he's like, I'm like like the Ekalavya to his Dronacharya. Let me put it that way. I haven't, he passed away long before, I even heard about him. But to me, he's like this mentor that I never had, but I learned a lot of things by seeing him. So I was always interested in writing. I'd written a lot for cricket as a sports writer for a lot of cricket websites and stuff early on. And my passion for history, I thought to myself that I should write. So, they say every man has a book in him, at least one book. So I said, okay, let me write about it. Come to think of it, so I hail from, my father's side hails from Tanjore. And to me, whenever we go there, no visit is complete without a visit to the Periyakovil, Brihadishwara temple, right? And I used to always stand there and imagine, 1,000 years ago, Rajaraja Chola could have been standing right there where I was standing, right? And to me, that was a brilliant a moment where I would reflect and say, what would it have been like that? What would the temple have looked like? What would the environment have looked like? There would have been the same number of people probably coming in. The temple would have been new. So to me, that was the kind of like the spark where I said, okay, I need to write something about this. But then when I actually thought of writing, I thought the Chalukya Pallava period was slightly more interesting for me, given because the scope is much larger, right? Because the scope here is not that the Chola scope is smaller, because you can write always about, Kadaram and all those Southeast Asian regions as well. But here, if you think about it, right, from Lanka all the way to Ujjain or Kannauj, the scope is pan-India. And so to me, I wanted to write something about that. I wanted to write something also that most Indians wouldn't have read about. We all know the history we are taught is very Delhi-centric. So I wanted to write something about South India, and that's kind of how I came to. It's a long answer to a short question.
Oh, no. That's what was expected. We wanted a long answer. I'm sure the viewers will also be wanting a long answer because they'd like to understand your experience and perspective. And also, you've given a very logical reply. And when it comes to temple building, I would consider the Pallavas to be the early pioneers in the south. So Simha Vishnu Avani Simha began in 575. And the end of temple building, as that we know of now, got over in 1736 when the last Nayak king of Madurai, Meenakshi.
Can I just interject a little bit here, Rajeshji? So I don't think it's just the Pallavas, because if you look parallelly at the Chalukyas, if you go to Aihole and Pattadakal, they are also they are in fact from the 4th, 5th century of the current Common Era. So there's a lot of overlap. So to me, there's a lot of overlap in the cultures in terms of the temple building in both these kingdoms. I'm not qualified enough to say which came first, which came next. But to me, they were very parallel kingdoms in terms of their advancement of art and architecture and culture.
What I'm talking about is the continuity in a particular region, wherein where there are interjections with Pallava, Rashtrikuta, and Kakatiya constructions. Either through some reason, like the Hoysal architecture, it's all period connected. But if you look at the architecture connected with continuity, particularly towards the region which is the southern side of the Tungabhadra, and more so closer to Kanchipuram and Kumbakonam, the same temple carries these work and style several dynasties.
Right.
In sync. So the continuous in sync period is about 1200 years. That's what I'm referring about.
Okay.
If you really look at temple construction, the Gupta work is even earlier.
Correct.
Prior to that of the Chalukyas or anybody else. And you have some more to think of, because some of the temples were actually remade. The existing temples were removed and newer buildings were brought in. Like in the the Chalukyan region, you find the Mithuna, Maithuna styles also. A better person would be Dr. R. Nagaswamy, who's done extensive research, but picking here and there. So the continuity of architecture began with the Pallavas, and each one dynasty added. You go to the same temple, you'll find all the enemies in one place, like the Pallavas, the Cholas, the Pandyas, and the Hoysalas, all of them in one place in sync. That way we can understand that even though they were enemies with each other, they did not disturb the art, culture, and heritage of the region.
Yeah,
that was what was interesting.
Correct. And that's what I've tried to also bring out, in the sense, there's a chapter where I introduced Pulikeshi, right?
Yes.
And in which Pulikeshi is talking to his chief architect, Ravikirti. And he tells him, Ravikirti tells him, the Pallava king is also building some temples, just like you. And Pulikeshi laughs and says, yeah, you know what? Maybe in another life we could have been friends, but we are now both kings with our own kingdoms, and we have our own duties towards the kingdom. So the idea here is, they can be appreciative of the art, but as kings, politically they might have to oppose each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, Pulikeshi is known for a lot of work, and so are the Chalukyas.
Yeah. I wanted to bring that facet out. See, what I have consciously tried not to do, okay, so is not to bring my regional identity into the book. Okay, what that means is, although I'm a Tamilian, so I'm a Tamilian, but I live in Karnataka. Okay, and now, although that doesn't have anything to do with why I wrote the book that way, I consciously made an attempt to say that there really is no, if you look at it, there is no villain in the story, which is a very difficult thing. It's easy to write a story where there's a clear-cut villain. Because you can, all the bad attributes you can attribute to him, and then you can make it, the good fight, good versus evil, stuff like that. In this book, there are no villains in that sense. They are just kings who are trying to maneuver and posture and expand their own individual kingdoms. And at this point in time, and as I said in the cover of the book, the young lion is Narasimha.
Yes.
The aging lion is Pulikeshi. So the young lion is going up against the aging lion. To me, that's about it. I don't make any value judgments on which kingdom is better or anything of that nature. It's just an interesting story of an interesting time, and I'm trying to be that storyteller, telling everybody that story.
There's a strategy which Pulikeshi perhaps used as a young lion when he invaded
Pallava. Exactly.
And because of age and other preoccupations, he had perhaps, let his guard down.
Exactly.
The younger opponent found it a lot more easier to handle him.
Right.
Because according to the story, Pulikeshi must be a lot older than Narasimha, maybe about 20 years.
20 years, yeah. That's how I imagine it, yes.
Correct. So that must be a kind of a generation.
Yeah.
So that generational gap and the observation of Narasimha when Pulikeshi invaded his kingdom.
Yeah.
I've always wondered if there were no boundaries called Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, or any linguistic issues at that given point of time. We find all this coming in only in the 19th century.
See, if you think about Pulikeshi's kingdom, Pulikeshi's kingdom was most of North Karnataka and almost up to Mysore. Then it was Gujarat, South Maharashtra, Western Madhya Pradesh, bits of Telangana. Sorry?
Large kingdom.
Very large kingdom, but there are no, it's not like
It's not a linguistic
it
kingdom.
was not a linguistic thing. Yeah, he happened to be from this.
Even the Pallava kingdom, from the Tungabhadra to the Kaveri, was spanning 2 or 3 languages.
Correct. So I didn't want to make it like a, Tamil king going up against a Kannada king. No, it was not that at all. They were just 2 kings in that part of the world who were going up against each other.
I always wondered if the later Cholas and the Chalukyas, had they forged a very good alliance between themselves, they perhaps would have been able to stave off the invasions of people like Muhammad of Ghazni, Muhammad of Ghori. They're very strong, powerful, technically and militarily better suited to deal with those kind of invasions than the weaker rulers of the north at that time. But
possibly,
unfortunately, it was not to be.
Correct.
So it's like, so when is the second book coming out?
I've started writing it. It'll probably take me another maybe 3-4 months to finish writing, and then it has to go through the editing process and everything.
So sometime in 22.
Probably by end of 22 or early 23 is when I expect it.
Oh, very good. That was the kind of time that Kalki's books were also taking.
One book a year. It takes time, right? Because just writing it takes and this is not my full-time job, right? I have my full-time job, so I need to find the time. But then editing process and everything takes time. It's a learning for me as well as a first-time author. I didn't realize and understand how much effort editors put into it.
Absolutely, the editor enriches the work in a way that we cannot even imagine.
So I don't even know who my editors were because they were anonymous in a sense, but they did a very meticulous job. So I need to be thankful to them. Dotted every I and crossed every T. Suggested, is this really how you want to say this, or do you want to say it some other way? There's quite a lot of work that they
the use of appropriate words at appropriate situations.
Right.
Times, when we start writing or when we start thinking, it will be in one perspective. But when somebody else gets into the shoe, they would look at it in a different way. The editor is the first reader. The first audience is the editor. Quite naturally, they will have doubts. And if we answer their doubts, it's fine.
So for me, my first reader was actually my father. So I would, I was writing it on a Google document. And so every morning he would go and check if I had written to it, added to it, and then he would give me his comments. So he's the one who first read my book.
Oh, that's very good.
Yeah.
And also, you have to be lucky to get a good editor.
Absolutely.
If the editor does not have the perspective, or if the editor does not understand the perspective of the author, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
The book takes a longer time because of the to and fro. It will be like, deuce in tennis.
Yeah.
I think van in, van out, and it'll never be game, set, match.
I think a lot of it also had to do with my own inexperience as an author. And I think the editing process will probably go faster for the next book, because I also now know what to look out for, what to watch out for, what are the mistakes I shouldn't make while I'm writing.
Absolutely, I suppose so. And also, you have to maintain the consistency of style, language.
Yes.
Even if it is good language, you can't make it gooder. No. If it is good, stay good only.
Yeah.
Don't get better than good. These are things which the editors will try to emphasize.
Yeah.
Enrichment cannot take place suddenly. It has to evolve, and the process of evolution is very important, they say. I have never written a book. I only write essays. I've strictly stayed away from that because of these reasons. Though I've written almost 1,000 articles.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But not a single book. I've written, of course, one Renuka Devi Charitram for a local community, small book in about 100 pages only. But this is very nice. And I'm very happy that all the Indic authors are all people of letters from good universities, good standing, and interesting thought processes, very scholarly, completely unbiased, bringing out the truth. We are so used to these so-called cliched historians and authors who try to pass us through a colored lens and make all of us feel guilty about our heritage and ourselves.
So
And
the,
thanks to Arun Krishnan and authors of his ilk who helped us to look at the whole aspect in a very nice perspective.
thank you.
And when we read it in a very cool way. What was there is what was there was there. Why should it be colored that this act is bad, that act is good, this fellow is evil, that lady was dishonored, and this and that, and the society was like this. This was the evil of the society. It's like, trying to take some class also alongside. Well, that can be, but the class should be proper. The teacher should not suffer from a bias. And in that case, the authors suffered from a bias. They were coloring everything that they could get. Arun has, not fallen into that trap or not taken us also into the trap, and he's brought it out really well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
This is what is very, very important today. Every country has to feel happy about their history, happy about their heritage, happy about their international circles, international contacts, and how the society blossomed at that point of time. Even in the so-called evolved modern society of today, I'm sure there must be a lot of shortcomings. Only somebody who's writing about all this 100 years later will tell, well, we have to go in a time machine to see where we are and where we were. So at that point of time, this is how people lived. If there was no electricity, they lit a lamp. If there was no electricity, they had to use a pulley and a rope. And they had to fire it. If there was no gas, so they had to fire it with the, coal and firewood. That's all. We have to look at that. And fortunately, India is the fountainhead of philosophy and fountainhead of numerous civilizational activities. Therefore, we are all fortunate to be born in India. That we can say with a sense and matter of pride. And that is why there are no villains in such book. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think so. I think if you ask me what was the toughest part of writing the book was the fact that there are no villains in the book.
see, the story by itself will take us forward. There are here and there good and bad characters.
Correct.
Even in the good team, so-called one set, there is a team where they're all good guys. There is a mole, and bad guy, and that is brought out by you. Yeah, and that guy, whatever that he does, and how the team itself breaks because of one bad guy. That is adherence to righteousness. And that is only most important. Adherence to Dharma. Dharma which is self-sustaining. Something which helps us sustaining for the longest time. And that is Dharma. And Dharma helps us to do that. It is more important than anything. All these morals, values, truth, and all these words are all highly, very powerful terms which are being used today. But in the Indian context, adherence to Dharma. Vishesha Dharma, Samanya Dharma. Krishnappas, you can look at it as Vishesha Dharma. When we look at one of the spy network guys, you can look at it more as Samanya Dharma. So when we look at all these dharmas, then we understand how life can be. There's much to be learned for us today from such stories.
Correct.
We can become wiser, more intelligent, more street smart, and cleverer by going through all these stories, because there are lessons to be learned, I suppose.
Sure.
And it must have been a wonderful experience writing this, because you must be introspecting, reading, checking out, talking with people, and the experience must be very good.
Yeah, I mean, so the way it for me, the way it works is I almost see it like a movie. It actually, when I start to write, in my mind, it's running like a movie. I see this. So if I'm writing, for example, about Tissa sitting in the forest.
Yes.
I can actually see Tissa sitting in the forest. And then all I'm doing is trying to describe the place and then trying to describe what he's thinking about. If I were in the forest in that position at that time, what would have happened? What were the things going around? So to me, all I'm trying to do is put in words what I'm seeing in my mind. That's how it.
Yeah, absolutely. You address places which are super hot and the sweltering heat and the climate. Sri Lanka is not it's more closer to the equator than India, I suppose. So it would probably be hotter. And when you go into these forests, the paths that people travel and how they create a place where they hide and come back and go. So I suppose unless you run it as a movie in your mind, or the full story in your mind, you would not have been able to write.
I don't know if you noticed, but I also made it a point so that the southwest monsoon actually went from Lanka to Ujjain. In the sense, the rain didn't happen at the same month, in the same time all over the place, because the southwest monsoon takes its own, a few weeks to travel up.
Many weeks to go from here to there.
Correct. So that's kind of
5th of May here and 5th of May in Calcutta or in Ujjain.
So I had to pay attention to that. Yeah.
All that is very important when we go into concurrent periods at the same time.
Right.
It could be, there would be climate and other variances, local topographical differences.
Yeah.
Everyone, unfortunately, only looks at culture and language because it's extremely political today.
Yeah.
But otherwise, when we look at geography, the local species of trees, plants, birds, and animals, there are some parts of India where there are no elephants even.
Correct.
In some parts, people, tend to, overlook that, and suddenly you'll find an elephant coming out of that place.
Correct.
Fortunately, you have stuck to those knittings very well, and it's come out well.
Oh, thank you.
So I suppose the book must be beginning to do well now. It's now that you've undergone a launch process formally once or twice. Would you be doing a lecture tours physically?
See, I was supposed to actually, this whole of January, I was supposed to be traveling. And then once Omicron hit, we cancelled all plans. So there was supposed to be this Delhi book fair and then the Chennai book fair.
Okay.
But all of those plans got cancelled. So I'm hoping that after Feb 15th, I'm assuming that things will start going back to normal. Then I will start, these book promotional tours, or going and doing book signings or book readings and so on. So I'm looking forward to that. I look forward to meeting people and actually talking to them about the book in person. So let's see how it goes.
It will be very interesting. The most of us as readers are very happy to see the author in person.
Sure.
And thanks to modern technology, at least we get to see the authors and interact with them online at least.
Right.
Such a facility was not there before.
Sure.
And I suppose all of us owe a big, it's time that all of us pay a big and rich tribute to Kalki. In spite of the fact that he wrote in Tamil, we must understand that he addressed the nation at large through Tamil.
Correct.
And he was a nationalist through Tamil. And that was a very rare attribute.
In North India, they have this practice if you've seen when classical musicians, say Ustad Zakir Hussain or Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia, when they talk about their gurus, they'll always touch their ears, right? So I always love that, because when you said Kalki, my hand was almost automatically going like this, because people like us, we are not even fit to take his name without actually paying obeisance to him. So
absolutely, without supplicating in front of him.
Yeah.
Once at a intercollegiate event, I must just say that I was doing a program wherein I was interacting with the audience, this other students, and the question was, what will I do if I make couple of millions of dollars. And Pat came the reply. I said that I will produce Sivakami in Sabadam as a movie. And so, therefore, whenever I get to see any work connected with Sivakami in Sabadam, even in it becomes apparent and visible in front of me, it manifests itself. So I was so eager and therefore went through the book completely. And some of the members of the audience today, in spite of the technical glitches, waited for half an hour because it is a story connected with Vathapi, Narasimha, Pulikesi, Pallavas, and the Chalukyas. That shows the strong connect of, all of us with the fiction based on history.
Correct.
So, thank you so much for this
Thank
session.
you.
And looking forward to read your second book. And I'm sure that will be interesting. And soon all of us will have to read all the 3 books then, just as how we read the trilogies of all the other great authors. And let this be a very auspicious beginning for you.
Thank you, Rajesh ji. I really appreciate it.
We are using a Desi app called Vayam, and through them we have had the opportunity to meet about 25, 26 authors. Every Friday has been very fruitful. A new book and a new author every week has made life really exciting for me in the last 6 months or so. And thanks to all of you for making my life interesting and exciting, and also for all the audience who are associated with the Verandah Club. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
May God bless you with more and more success.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.